Welcome to Embodied Resistance. This is a podcast exploring how dance movement therapy, harm reduction, and embodied healing can support gender diverse youth impacted by school violence. I am your host, Tori, a dance movement therapist, passionate about creating safe spaces where movement becomes a tool for resilience, self-expression, and healing. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Dr. Thania Acarón, a dance movement therapist, educator, and researcher who focuses on gender nonconformity, movement, and the intersection of embodiment and social justice. Dr. Acarón's research, particularly in nonconforming bodies, the role of gender identity and sexual orientation in dance movement therapy, challenges traditional therapy models by exploring how movement-based practices can offer affirmation, safety, and self-discovery for gender diverse individuals. In this episode, we'll be diving into the ways dance movement therapy can support gender exploration, the role of movement in identity formation, and how movement can be harm reduction strategy for those navigating violence, systemic oppression. Dr. Acarón, thank you so much for being here. I am really excited for this conversation. To start, can you share me a bit about what led you to explore the intersection of dance movement therapy, gender, and social justice?
Wonderful. Thanks. Thanks for having me. I trained, I'm originally from Puerto Rico and did my dance therapy degree in New York City. And I was doing a dual master's dance education and dance movement therapy in the program called Alternate Route. So I was trying to do simultaneously two masters, which led me to look at, as part of the placements in NYU, I was looking at dance movement therapists that were working in schools that, so that I could have both credits actually, so that the placement would count for two. So in that very, I think, ambitious way of doing 2 degrees, I encountered a lot of school violence, and this ended up being the precursor for my doctoral research on violence prevention through movement. So I was looking at interviewing in my thesis, interviewing different people across the world, not only dance movement therapists, but I interviewed artists and I interviewed people who were educators as well. So looking at how they understood violence. And before I started the doctoral degree, I left New York, decided that the work in schools was enough for me, and I was quite burnt out as well, hence why now I specialize in burnout prevention, and spent a year and a half in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, almost 2 years. And there they had different spaces. So when I moved to a new space, I always have a kind of a way in to build my community. So one is my LGBTQ plus community. So I identify as LGBTQ plus, it's queer, and obviously the artist community. So when I moved there, I engaged with a center there where there were different pockets in the LGBTQ plus center. So there was the HIV group, there was a kind of lesbian group, and then there was a gay men's group. So they were all quite separate. And so the director one day was like grumbling and kind of going, oh, I don't know what to do with this women's group, blah, 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 blah. Like he was just like a bit annoyed, and I'm going, okay, what's going on? Oh, we need to have some kind of group going. And I said, okay, well, I can offer a dance movement therapy group, but I don't want it to just be for one group. I want it to be for everyone. And so he was like, fine, try it out. And so I started, gathering this group, and then went to the different spaces. There was a trans group, and I went in and I interviewed the group, and they were like, there was one person, I'll never forget this because it kind of marks you for life. Well, how are you going to keep us safe? Right. And I took that very to heart. I was like, no, I mean, movement will be a safe container and we'll try, as we do as dance movement therapists. But, and then unfortunately, this is 2009, 2010. Unfortunately, no trans people came to that group, right? So when I came to Scotland, I was very curious about how to support different types of intersectional identities within a group anyway, right? So and doing that open group opened up that opportunity to explore that in a way, right, rather than being in silos as they were before. So when I came to do my doctorate, I knocked on the door of the LGBT Centre, LGBT Health it's called, in Scotland, in Edinburgh. And I was very lucky that the mental health coordinator was an art therapist, Ali Wren. And that was great because then there was somebody, and not only an art therapist, it was an art therapist that had a dance movement therapist, part of her core training at Queen Margaret University. And I was so excited because there was somebody that was like, yes, let's do a dance movement therapy group. And, we can't really have it like a therapy group, so we'll do it like a well-being group and we can collaborate. So then, we did a series of workshops and I was still very open. And because the LGBT Centre had quite an open trans inclusive policy, which is, was incredible to see, because it was ingrained in every single operational way, right? Trans people came to the workshops, and then once I call it like the audition, once they kind of sensed that I was a safe practitioner for trans groups, and then they invited me. It was almost like an additional vetting, which I understand, obviously, the as a cis woman that coming into that space, they wanted to make sure, that my language was correct, that, that it was a safe space. So I was very, very honored when they invited me to do different kind of one day, workshops with trans youth. We did a weekend with a voice practitioner together, and then a couple of workshops, full day workshops with them. And so my practice has kind of gone 180 from working with children. And even in the schools, I was kind of the person that because I was a dance therapist in a public school, a lot of the relationship, let's just say, like a lot of the relationship questions were kind of referred to me when there was a kid that was kind of questioning or, in any kind of way. They were like, okay, Thania, we'll talk to you. So the teachers did get to them. So I did have a little bit of that, creating those safe spaces where queer kids come in, and we have had lots of chats, and then to then leading LGBTQ plus specific things. And now I'm in Wales, and so I've had several pots of funding to lead LGBTQ plus workshops. I've been called to do like a festival, kind of a queer women's festival, and doing something around celebrating queer identity. So I've had these kind of opportunities now in the UK to be able to lead those kind of sessions. And also then with Alison Wren, with the art therapist, we wrote a chapter around LGBTQ plus themes that arose from our practice and collaborative practice. And then we've done some training around that. So we've done a couple of webinars. I did one long time ago for the ADTA, and then Ali and I did one for a Chinese dance movement therapy consortium, Inspirees, and we did one during the pandemic for practitioners. and then I've done one for a play therapist. So, I've been kind of in either from the therapist competencies or leading groups in that way. So a very long-winded answer to your question.
No, thank you for all of that. I love that. I appreciate that. Yeah, as that journey of where you are today shaped you into the individual that you are. And every experience has changed that. And I really liked and enjoyed where you talked about somebody that was trans asked you about, is this going to be a safe space? And then leading into the precursors of making sure that some place is safe by like learning language and educating yourself. And I'm curious also about how safety is presented for you. How do I want to word this? The safety in yourself, the body safety, and like safety in an environment as well. Like, is that two different things for you, or is that one singular thing that you see that appears in work?
Yeah, I mean, one of the themes that we wrote about in that chapter is called Under the Skin, was about safe, unsafe, and how this is an ongoing theme, even though it's a universal theme. It's a universal theme, regardless of, because this is the thing. I always say sexual orientation and gender identity, gender expression, they're universal, right? These are things that exist that, that people should get training on. It should be part of every single program rather than like an ad hoc, today we're going to do a diversity intersectionality day, right? But they're quite ingrained. And safety, as me as a practitioner, it really is about making sure that the spaces that I choose to go to or have these kind of very inclusive policies. And I've been to festivals, for example, where like the toilets are not really inclusive, and things like that are markers of safety for gender non-conforming people. And for me, it's very important, to advocate for not only the space that I create in terms of the interventions and my art form, but also that the structure of the space. And those are conversations that we had a lot with the organizations that we work with. So there's a choice there, right? And I chose not to return to one of the organizations that I worked with in Wales. There was an organization I chose not to return because their policies were not trans inclusive. And so I did make that choice. So yeah, there are some choices as a professional that I have made, and they've since rectified it and everything. They've really tried to redress it, but it was quite a hard stance for me. So there's that physical safety as well. How people access that space, even getting into a venue, and obviously the accessibility part of things, which is, I think it's kind of ingrained in that. Safety as a theme has come up quite a lot in a lot of the groups, because there's the safety in the most basic sense. There's safety in showing who you are in movement, so that comes up quite a lot. Mm-hmm. And I've had to sometimes in groups even address, it's like, if we're laughing when somebody suggests something, or if we're already kind of making a comment about people's movements, how safe does that make, right? So that make it for everyone. So those are like practical times where that's come up. But in one of my trainings, I had to use a sports metaphor. I mean, it's absolutely hilarious that I had to go there. I'm not a sports person, but I was training some student counselors about LGBTQ plus issues, and I wasn't prepared for how maybe resistant they were to the topic. I was quite taken aback, right? So I got questions like, do you think that there's the promotion of the LGBTQ plus agenda? So questions like that, which were very difficult, but I love that challenge in a way because this is the teaching opportunity, right? So I was getting those kind of questions, and I was trying to figure out how to get them to empathize. And so I said, I use this analogy. So I said, listen, okay, what's the national team? So I don't know. So we would, and does this national team, sports team, have a nemesis? Okay, so we looked at the nemesis and the team. So I said, okay, so let's say that you're visiting a friend in your nemesis city, but you want to go and you're a big fan of your home team, right? So then you go into the pub. To go, pub metaphor. We're in the UK, so it's like you go into the pub and you're watching the game, but then you're in the nemesis environment. So you might not feel so comfortable wearing your team colors. And you want to root for your team, but you don't feel like you can because there's a risk for violence. Particularly, this is, again, very cultural because here, football and rugby are a big thing, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, football meaning soccer, US soccer, but it's a big thing. So I said, well, you want to root for your team, but you don't feel safe, right? And there's been all these cases of people wearing the wrong colors or people wearing the scarves that are not, and then getting. So I said, this is what it feels like. And when you're on the alphabet mafia, LGBT, right? This is what it feels like, that you have to do a lot of measures of security about whether it's safe for you to root, right? Root for your team, whether it's safe for you to hold somebody's hand. And those are all kind of safety measures that you have to do. And I think finally I got through. So that analogy got through because everybody could understand in that sense of wanting desperately to be who you are, express what you want to, but feeling that you can't, right? Feeling that you could be ostracized, or even, somebody's going to be violent towards you. So that's an example, I guess, that I had to use in some of my trainings to look at that. And yeah, in the chapter, we go a bit deeper into those notions about how comfortable we feel expressing that, even within a therapeutic setting, right? If even when meeting a therapist for the first time, because that's also another issue that a lot of people from the LGBTQ plus community have about accessing mental health care and healthcare, right? And those being quite unsafe experiences for people. And then when you're trying to go in as a therapist, then how do you counter that? How do you support somebody who has had kind of usually had negative experiences, been misgendered, or people assume that you, do you have a boyfriend? Do you have a girlfriend? Right? Your wife. So there's a lot of assumptions that people make based on very heteronormative, norms, heteronormative standards, or whatever it is. And then that becomes a big question in this space, right? And I think that's where movement is really beautiful, I think. Because one of the movement interventions I've done in my workshops is that we have a duet and somebody has a secret or something that they, and I try to, as much as possible, kind of, everybody has something that they're in the closet about, whether it's like, I don't know, a comic, or you're something that maybe is not, deemed as socially acceptable or as cool, right? So I don't know, if I'm a fan of like fairy books, then in other spaces, I don't know. So I have them dance out that, the coming out of the disclosing, even if that you secretly like Post-its and you're nerdy about Post-its and you're, I don't know, to somebody else, right? And And there's beautiful discoveries that have happened in the sessions as a result of that, because then people understand. So a lot of my workshops have been for the LGBTQ plus community. So in many of my direct service work, it's a bit preaching to the community, preaching to the choir. But in the training for, I guess, allies, people who want to be allies, then I draw upon these common connectors of human experience to be able to then, instigate some kind of empathy or understanding, right? That might then help support somebody down the line, right?
Yeah, you talk about advocacy a lot, which I really appreciate. As therapists, we are big advocate for our communities, our clients, and anybody that we work with. And you do that a lot, it seems like, in your practice. And then you also talk about accessibility in many ways, so spaces in general, or even healthcare and getting the support that people need. Also, just like the way that you structure your practices is a harm reduction strategy for these people, making it more accessible for people that are experiencing mental imbalances. And yeah, I really appreciate you highlighting those. And then you also talk about, I'm just going to put a label on it, like code switching as well out in the world, of when you feel unsafe and that you don't have like put on this performance of somebody else for safety, hiding that identity, which is so hard, but like also the world that we live in. And I think it's also just great to point that out to people as well, of just kind of normalizing it per se, because it's isolating to be like, oh, I'm the only one out here. But if you normalize it, then it's not, it makes a more group cohesion of, I'm not alone. We're all doing this together. And I really appreciate that you build that foundation within your practice, and the examples that you provided, the dance movement therapy practices of telling a secret. And I think that also goes along with code switching as well, of we're holding on to these things and hiding these things. And this gives us like a space to come out of the closet per se, and have that safe space where they can come out not only to you as a therapist, but other people in the room, and creating a sense of community. And I think that is very impactful. Yeah, and I'm just like really curious about how you can use these practices in creating community without, since like some people do feel very excluded or isolated when they are part of the alphabet mafia.
Yeah, I mean, most of my work has been more of this, less on the therapy side. I mean, I'm a therapist, but the workshops that I've done are therapeutic in a way, but it's more the kind of arts, health, and well-being continuum, right? I think it's very different when you're doing a proper psychotherapy relationship, a psychotherapeutic relationship with someone. So one of the themes that I've been invited to, well, I've kind of offered when I've been invited to a festival or kind of these one-offs, one days, was about celebrating. There were two themes that we did. One was celebrating our identities. So I did that in the Lesbian Lives Conference, for example, which is very trans-inclusive conference, which is wonderful. And we focus on this, on what have you overcome? How can we be proud of that? What is an aspect of being LGBT plus that you're celebrating? Because a lot of the media and a lot of the rhetoric is very negative. Sometimes, up to, I think recently, a lot of even the movies are these like very difficult tropes about, it's always somebody who dies or somebody, they can't be together, so there's a lot of messages that have been sent about these kind of relationships that don't get a happy ending. So I think in movement we have such an opportunity there to celebrate those things and to see the positives and the connections within the community. So that's been one of the things where they've been my favorite groups, and I've kind of embarked in that in different ways. Obviously, with these different groups, it's been quite different, but focusing on the celebration, on the community, on what we want to offer and receive from the community. That's been also a theme that we've done in movement and several of those big sessions. And that's come across quite well, right? Because people felt that they weren't alone. And so that's been really important. And with the trans groups we led with in Edinburgh, there was one about finding your walk. So with that kind of simple movement metaphor of, finding how you want to express. And, some of the participants had asked for deportment classes. I remember I got approached first for deportment classes. So how to move like a woman or how to move more. And I was like, well, I'm not the best person to do that. I have no clue about what that means, right? In a way, what we can offer in it is to play with, societal things, go anti tropes, anti different stereotypes, And interestingly enough, I always think about that. The biggest debates were about music. What's hyper feminine? We looked at it. What was hyper feminine? What's hyper masculine? And there were so many conversations about what came up. Hyper masculine. Oh yeah, it's rap, it's hip hop, and then hyper feminine. Oh, it was I don't know who it was, Madonna. And then somebody said, oh yeah, but I experienced Madonna very masculine. So there were some really interesting debates, which I loved. Were really interesting about how difficult then this becomes, because it really, people's measure of what gender is very wide, right? So there were some interesting debates about that. So obviously there are a lot of safety considerations around playing with gender and stereotypes, and people had also the option to not engage, to sit out if this was quite triggering for them or this was not their jam. So it's really important for me that we wanted to play a little bit with the absurdity of it all, really, to be able to then find your own sense of verticality and thinking about the planes, right? The vertical plane is about self and identity, right? The one where you're standing, the one in the door plane, also called that. We kind of embrace that. And so, there's been different aspects where I think a lot of my approach has been to I don't know, I guess, disrupt a little bit by bringing movement into it, and disrupt the trope of like, we're going to look at only like really difficult things of being LGBT. They do come up, right? But there's also something to be proud of. And I think despite current climates, there's a lot of resilience there, and there's a lot of desire to connect there and desire to be seen, which needs the space to be recognized. And then movement allows, dance and movement allows that opportunity, isn't it? Without having to speak, to put difficult words there, right? So the movement holds it, which has been great.
Yeah, I love how you talk about celebration and pride within the queer community and in general the LGBTQIA2 plus community. I think, well, we do have like pride every year, but also just queer pride, gay pride, trans pride, all of that pride, I think, lives within all of us, and embodying that pride of like who we are. Yeah, and I think that's beautiful. Even in history wise, using dance as a tool to celebrate ourselves in connection with each other, like with whacking and vogue and other forms of dance that were used years ago, and just making that sense of community and a safe space for each other to express themselves and to celebrate and just embody what we are feeling has been going on for years. And this is nothing new for our community. And I'm so glad that you are creating these spaces to like kind of psychoeducate on that and creating those spaces for people to bring back that joy, bring back that pride and everything. I love that. And I'm curious, how can therapists and educators apply dance movement therapy as a harm reduction strategy for gender diverse youth?
Well, I think if therapists haven't had that as part of their training, I mean, in the UK, there is a lot of training in that. Not a lot, but there's quite a bit on offer about understanding the nuance. I think allyship takes commitment because the alphabet mafia language is one of the quickest the quickest changing language in the world, right? It's and we need to stay up to date, right? It requires constant engagement, and things are evolving in terms of how the approaches are evolving. So it does take that commitment to keep being current, which means I think it's also learning from our clients, because they are our teachers in a way. We don't need to be the sole authority, but also engaging with training, regardless of whether people have said that to me. Oh, but I don't work with the LGBTQ plus community, right? So and I was like, well, you will. This is why I say, like, gender, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, they're all relationships, they're all parts of human experience. So this should be part of every therapist's professional development in some form. I think that's the harm reduction. The reduction is from that, because I started this work, and I called up my ally and my friend, and I was just like, we need to do something about this, because in a conference, a therapist said to me, oh, it's quite trendy to be trans now, right? So they kind of mentioned this as an off comment while we're having lunch, and I was like, well. I had to, in Puerto Rico, they have a very graphic saying called "you swallow blood," right? Which means like you have to keep it together and not lash out. And I was like, well, it's not a trend when you risk violence, when you risk being kicked out of your house, when you risk just for being who you are, you risk your employment, you risk a lot of things. So this is not is not a trend. So I had to go, like, my friend did say that I approached it calmly, but inside I was like, oh wow, if this is because they were an arts therapist, creative arts therapist. I was like, oh wow, if this is our therapists, I feel really bad for people coming in and having that space. I mean, in the UK, luckily there's a new directories about LGBTQ plus therapists. So there's a way to find, to know. They've been vetted, so they have their own system. Right. So yeah, harm reduction from a therapist point of view is keeping current. Right. That's the do no harm. I've had really interesting questions come up in the trainings, and I love that, because this is the space to bring that. or people are like, oh, I have some clients, and sometimes they come in presenting as a man, and sometimes they come in presenting as a woman, and I don't know, what to do with this, right? So bringing that into the space, which is wonderful. I said, well, is the expectation that they choose, right? And then they were like, okay, wow, okay, I hadn't thought about that. I was like, so yeah, you norm with your client what how to best be for them in that space. And if they come presenting as a man and they want to be called Tom, then fine. And then if the next session they want to be called Cicely, then that's great. So, and then your job is just to hold that for them and see, how they're coping with it all. And they're like, oh yeah. And for me, it was very simple, right? But for other people, but I had to learn it. Luckily with the center in Scotland, like it was just a beautiful way to learn, how to establish boundaries, how to communicate about things, so a lot of the staff that worked there were really, really useful for me in terms of like even the language and, how do you work in these community environments, right? And how to word your adverts, like the promos for workshops and flyers. Those little things make a big difference, right? And so yeah, I think as a therapist it is about training, right? And it is about acknowledging privilege in the space. I almost have to go in, I'm sorry that I'm cis. I go, so it's gonna be all right. But yeah, I do, because I always have that first, it's like, how are you gonna keep us safe? I was like, yeah, I want to be a safe person for people to come into a space, but it's not a given, right? We can make mistakes, right? We can get it wrong, very wrong sometimes. And then it becomes about this repair. And trying to do better, right? But yeah, there's a lot of unintentional harm that happens. Because when you say harm reduction, I think, a lot of therapists will have a very strong reaction to that word. I'm not doing harm, right? Right. I'm trained as a therapist, but yeah. People come in with these experiences, very negative experiences. So a lot of it is undoing, not undoing, but like re-signifying that relationship with people and committing to do better.
Educating and removing biases, creating those spaces. Talk about normalizing too. And you also talk about the instance where the other therapist talks about this is like the trend, but is it really a trend, or are we safer to come out now? We're coming out more instead of hiding, or are we actually realizing what is going on? We are more access what is going on in our bodies rather than dismissing them and having those resources as well. And also, you talk about educating as well, learning more about the changes and being open to new perspectives and everything. I'll use like an example for my experience, very short experience history, but I have a client as of right now, and he's been talking about a partner that is the same sex, and I kind of more like normalize what is going on instead of like addressing it, debunk it, try to figure out like what's going on. I let him go with it. And we were playing a game and he put like 2 blue prongs in a game piece. That was like the game of life. And I didn't like question why he did that. And I feel like questioning that unnormalizes it per se and makes it he's doing something wrong when he did nothing wrong. It's just normalizing these instances and also letting them go at their own pace to open up to us as well as clinicians or whoever's supporting the person. If somebody comes in differently dressed every single day, allowing them to address it when they are ready, or just letting it be normal, like normalize it instead of making it such as like a weird thing, I think also creates a safe space where it's just, oh, this is just who you are. That is not a wrong way to be.
Yeah. I mean, I rarely use that word normal because I don't know what normal is, really, you know, and I can only, and we all have our biases. This is the thing, you can't get rid of bias. It's the lens through which you see the world. It's acknowledging what impact that bias is happening, is doing to somebody or to yourself, right? I think, I think it's more about welcoming all sorts of explorations. Because if it would have been a client on an opposite sex relationship, then this wouldn't even be an issue, isn't it? That's what I mean. Like whatever pegs they want to do, whatever, we just have to apply. If our lens is a heteronormative lens, we always go, if this was a straight person, a straight couple, we would be saying the same thing. If this would be, so there's a lot of that perspective making, I think, that comes into the work. That is important, right? The technical term is normalization, but that assumes that the default is kind of a certain sex, certain types of a certain type of sex, a certain type of relationship, a certain type of age, right? Certain types of ability, right? And whatever's outside of those things. And there's so many different aspects of identity, right, that come into play. That it's not normal, right? Yeah, but yeah. It's great that your client will always do these things, and I bet they're going to see what your face is. It's like, right? When they say partner and say he, then they'll be checking your reactions. That's another safety check, because I've done it with my supervisors. I've done it with my therapists. I check how they instinctively react to these things. And people try to disguise it, but your body never lies. So, because a lot of the people and some of the training have come on like, I'm just really awkward about this, and I don't really know, and people can sense that. People can also sense whether you're being congruent with yourself or whether you're putting on a performance for a client, right? And we need to make that be part of your core set of values, so that it doesn't really tick any boxes, really, or trigger any kind of different responses, so that the other people in the room with you will feel safer with you as well.
The nonverbal communication that people are like tuning into. Yeah,
definitely.
I'm curious, where do you see future dance movement therapy heading in relation to gender and social justice?
I'm very happy to see that there's so much recent research happening. I mean, I wish there was more. For example, there's a book now in music therapy, the Oxford Handbook for Trans Music Therapy, I think it is. And I wish we were at that point on the dance movement therapy side. I mean, there was an article about competencies. I supported some of the consultation around that, which interviewed DMTs on how comfortable they felt with LGBTQ plus issues, right? But that was a while ago. That was almost, I think, like almost 10 years ago that happened. So I think there's a long way to go. But in terms of social justice, I'm really happy to see a lot of new books coming out and, questioning some of the structures, the traditional structures, even within dance movement therapy, questioning the way people have been taught and the way bodies have been seen. And so I think that there's this kind of beautiful, difficult questioning that is evolving that is very encouraging, because it allows then for more research and more of a spotlight on a variety of identities, which, maybe it didn't many years ago, right? So I think that it's quite encouraging to be seeing these things about cultural competence, LGBTQ plus competencies. Eventually we'll have to also look at age, right? I'm going to be starting a new project now on perimenopause and menopause through dance movement therapy. So yesterday just got the news about the grants. So it's really exciting. But yeah, it'll be looking at those kind of structures. And there's a pilot that's going to focus on leading some sessions for trans men and non-binary people who are going through perimenopause and menopause, because that's been really not spoken about at all. And there's a recent film that just came out called The Rainbow Menopause done in Wales and England, for this festival called the Iris Prize. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's an LGBTQ plus film festival. It's very, very well attended in the UK. It's amazing. And they had these short films, and one of them was about this experience of menopause for trans men and non-binary people. That, the literature and the research doesn't really even mention them, right? So it'll be really interesting to investigate. But yeah, age is going to be something that we look at, right? So obviously you're focusing on the work with youth. I mean, I don't work with young people for a long time. I haven't worked with young people per se. But, I am working with people who are 40 plus, and then that's a very different, between 40 and 65. We haven't even spoken about that demographic and the particular needs sometimes, right? It's kind of taken us for granted. So I think there'll be, there's new encouraging research happening, which makes me very, very happy and hopeful. But I really hope that there's more research in DMT about LGBTQ plus, discoveries, challenges, ideas, frameworks, because it just hasn't been seen, and there isn't a lot out there.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I know when I was looking for research specifically on gender violence with dance movement therapy, I really struggled with finding sources and everything. I did find yours. That was fun, easy to find on the ADTA website. And yeah, I am very thankful for your work that you do and continue to do for the dance movement therapy research world. I do reference your work a lot in my work, and it's truly inspiring, because I hope to reach that direction at some point. Yeah, and I really appreciate all the work that you do, and you're doing so much for the communities, and not even in the UK or Wales or wherever you are doing your work, but also overall. I'm in the United States, and it's still impacting me and my work and practices. So you have done such powerful work, and it's impacting so many people and spreading education and doing your research. I'm so honored to get to talk to you, and that you made this time. But I will wrap up this podcast. But this has been such an insightful and necessary conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise on gender nonconforming, conformity, and embodied healing, and just the ways movement can serve as a tool for self-expression and resistance. Your work is vital, just for all of the communities, creating more inclusive and affirming spaces. And I know our listeners will gain so much from this discussion, as I have as well. Before we wrap up, are there any final thoughts or resources you'd like to share for those who are wanting to learn more about dance movement therapy, gender inclusivity, or embodied approaches to social justice?
Yeah, I mean, I'm the director of a company called The Body Hotel. And we have a YouTube series, and it's on Instagram, called Body Concierge. And those are movement strategies for movement for well-being. So it takes some of the dance movement therapy concepts, it breaks them down in kind of very, layperson's language, and anybody can access them. They're about 5 minutes, less than 5 minutes. So if people want to check that out, and we're on everywhere, Facebook, Instagram. We are not on this other, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. We are. We don't do any. At the Body Hotel, so they can find us, and some of our upcoming projects. We do sometimes some online projects, and if people are interested in that, they can just get in touch. So, and thank you for having me. Yeah, thank you for those wonderful questions.
Yeah, of course. And I'll put that information in the description as well, so they can have access that pretty easily.
Right.
But thank you so much for those listening. And I'll include the links and episode notes to Dr. Acarón's work, including nonconforming bodies, as well as additional resources on dance movement therapy and gendered affirming practices. If you enjoyed this conversation, please consider sharing this episode, leaving a review, or follow the podcast to stay updated on future discussions. Embodied Resistance is all about exploring how movement, trauma recovery, and harm reduction can create safer, more affirming spaces, especially for gender diverse youth navigating school violence. Dr. Acarón, thank you again for your time and wisdom. And to everyone listening, thank you for being here. Until next time, take care, stay grounded, and keep moving toward healing.